The lecture hall at Yale University was packed. Professor James Mitchell, one of the world's leading linguists, stood before hundreds of students presenting a simple but devastating argument. Some languages were simply more sophisticated than others. Latin, he declared confidently, represents the pinnacle of linguistic complexity. Its grammatical structure, case systems, verb conjugations, these are what separate advanced civilizations from primitive ones. When we study language, we're studying intellectual capacity. The students nodded, accepting this as truth from the world's most respected linguistic authority. Then a hand went up in the back. Maria Santos, a Filipino graduate student, asked quietly, "Professor, what about Tagalog?" The lecture hall erupted in laughter. Not cruel laughter necessarily, but dismissive. Tagalog, a language from the Philippines, being compared to Latin. Professor Mitchell smiled indulgently. "Miss Santos, Tagalog is beautiful, but let's not confuse emotional attachment to your native language with actual linguistic sophistication. Latin is objectively more complex." More laughter. Maria's face flushed red. She sat down. Several students turned to look at her with sympathetic but patronizing expressions. One whispered to her friend, "That's cute that she thinks her language is as advanced as Latin." But Maria knew something they didn't. She had spent 3 years studying Tagalog grammar. Her dissertation research had uncovered something extraordinary about her language, something that contradicted everything Mitchell just said. Something that would shock the entire linguistic community. That night, Maria opened her research files. 3 years of work, thousands of analyzed sentences, data that showed Tagalog had a verb aspect system so sophisticated, so nuanced, that it made Latin look elementary by comparison. She began creating a presentation, not emotional, scientific, pure data, grammatical charts, linguistic evidence, irrefutable proof. She titled it, "A Comparative Analysis of Verb Aspect Systems in Tagalog and Classical Latin, Challenging Assumptions About Language Complexity." For weeks, Maria worked in silence. No one knew what she was doing. No one knew she was about to change everything. Then she sent her research to 5 of the most respected linguists in the world. What happened next shocked everyone, especially Professor Mitchell. Within days, responses flooded in. Dr. Eleanor Voss from Harvard. "This is extraordinary. We need to publish this immediately." Stanford linguist. "This changes everything we thought we knew." MIT professor. "Tagalog's grammatical system rivals Latin's sophistication." By the end of the week, the entire linguistics community was talking about Maria Santos and her groundbreaking discovery. Her language wasn't primitive. It was brilliant. It was sophisticated. It was, in many ways, more complex than Latin. Professor Mitchell received copies of all the responses. He read Maria's analysis carefully, line by line, every chart, every piece of evidence, every linguistic pattern she documented. Then something happened that no one expected. He called her. When Maria answered the phone, Professor Mitchell's voice was measured but different. Not the confident authority from the lecture hall, something else, something careful. "Miss Santos, I've reviewed your research, all of it, every page, every chart, every linguistic analysis." Maria's heart raced. She didn't know what to expect. "Your work is exceptional," he continued. "I need to speak with you in person. Can you come to my office tomorrow?" The next morning, Maria walked into Professor Mitchell's office with her research in her hands. The walls were covered with his credentials, his publications, his lifetime of accomplishments proving his authority in the field. Mitchell stood when she entered. His expression was serious. "Please sit," he said. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Mitchell began. "I've been a linguist for 40 years, he said slowly. "I've built my career on certain assumptions about language complexity. I've published books based on those assumptions. I've taught thousands of students based on those assumptions." He paused, looking directly at her. Your research challenges those assumptions, and I've spent the last 18 hours confirming that your research is correct." Maria felt tears beginning to form. She wasn't sure if they were tears of vindication or something else. "Tagalog's verb aspect system," Mitchell continued, "is not simpler than Latin's tense system. It's different, and in many ways it's more sophisticated. Your analysis of the affix combinations, the nuances in meaning conveyed through morphological changes, this is genuine linguistic sophistication that I had completely dismissed." He stood and walked to his window overlooking the Yale campus. "I owe you an apology," he said without turning around. "Not just for that lecture, for decades of dismissing languages like Tagalog as less sophisticated, for perpetuating the idea that Western languages represent some kind of pinnacle of human achievement." Maria didn't know what to say. Mitchell turned back to face her. "The linguistics community is already responding to your work. Harvard wants to publish it. Stanford is requesting your methodology. MIT has invited you to present at their conference." He walked back to his desk and handed her a letter. "This is a letter of recommendation," he said. "I'm recommending you for a prestigious fellowship studying language structures globally, not because I feel guilty, though I do, because you've done extraordinary work that deserves recognition." Maria opened the letter. It was one of the most glowing recommendations she'd ever read, from one of the world's most respected linguists. "There's more," Mitchell said. "I'm writing a paper, an academic response to your research, acknowledging where my previous assumptions were wrong and how your findings change our understanding of linguistic complexity. I'm going to publish it in the same journal that publishes your work." Maria looked up at him. "You don't have to do that." "Yes, I do," Mitchell said firmly. "Not for you, for the field, for all the languages and cultures that have been dismissed as unsophisticated because they didn't fit into our Western framework of what advanced means." He sat back down at his desk. "I taught a lecture yesterday to a new group of students," he said. "I told them about your research. I told them about Tagalog. I told them I had been wrong. I explained linguistic sophistication doesn't correlate with geography or colonial power. It correlates with the complexity of human thought and cultural needs." Mitchell paused, then added quietly, "Several students asked me to help them study Tagalog." 2 weeks later, Maria presented her research at Yale's main auditorium, the same auditorium where students had laughed at her question. This time, she wasn't asking permission to speak. She was delivering findings that were reshaping the field. Professor Mitchell sat in the front row. When she finished, the standing ovation lasted for 3 minutes. Students who had mocked her weeks earlier were now taking notes on every word. Linguists from around the world had flown in to hear her speak. As Maria left the stage, Mitchell approached her with genuine warmth in his expression. "Thank you," he said simply, "for having the courage to challenge me, for doing the research, for changing how we think about language." Maria nodded, but she said nothing. Her accent hadn't changed, but now everyone was finally listening. 6 months after Maria's presentation, Yale University made an official announcement. The Department of Linguistics was creating a new initiative, Global Language Excellence. Its purpose was to study languages from non-Western traditions with the same rigor and respect previously reserved for European languages, and Maria Santos was appointed as its director. At 28 years old, she became the youngest department director in Yale's history. More importantly, she became the voice challenging centuries of linguistic bias. Professor Mitchell stepped down from his leadership role to work alongside her as a research fellow. Not out of obligation, out of genuine interest in learning from her perspective. Their first project was comprehensive. They brought linguists from around the world to study languages that had been dismissed as primitive, Tagalog of course, but also Mandarin, Swahili, Sanskrit, Hawaiian, and dozens of others. What they discovered transformed the field. Each language had sophistication that reflected the needs and thoughts of its speakers. Each language was a window into how different cultures solved the problem of human communication. None was inferior. None was superior. They were simply different expressions of human linguistic genius. Maria's research was published in 5 major academic journals. She received invitations to speak at Harvard, MIT, Stanford, Oxford, and Cambridge. She was nominated for the prestigious Breakthrough Prize in Language Science. But the moment that meant most to her came during a casual lunch with Professor Mitchell. "I've been thinking about that day in the lecture hall," Mitchell said, picking at his salad. "When you asked about Tagalog." Maria smiled. "I was terrified." "You should have been," Mitchell said. "I was terrible, but I'm grateful you had the courage to challenge me anyway." He paused, then continued. "I've been contacted by several textbook publishers. They want to create new linguistics textbooks that reflect what we've learned. Textbooks that don't position Western languages at the top of some hierarchy. I told them I'd only do it if you're the lead author." Maria looked up, surprised. "You've earned it," Mitchell said simply. "And the field needs your voice leading this conversation, not mine." 1 year later, Global Languages, a comprehensive study of linguistic excellence across cultures, was published. It became the standard linguistics textbook in universities worldwide. Students learning linguistics for the first time would learn what Maria had discovered: that language complexity exists everywhere, expressed differently in different places. The textbook included an entire chapter on Tagalog. It explained the verb aspect system that had shocked the academic world. It honored the Filipino language as what it truly was: sophisticated, beautiful, and worthy of serious scholarly attention. Back in Manila, Maria's parents received a package. It was a copy of the textbook. On the dedication page, Maria had written, "To my parents, who taught me to speak Tagalog with pride, even when the world told me it was less than. To my grandmother, whose wisdom was encoded in the language she taught me. And to everyone whose native language has been dismissed as unsophisticated, you deserve better. Your language carries the genius of your ancestors. Never let anyone convince you otherwise." Maria's mother cried reading those words. Her father held the textbook like it was the most precious thing he'd ever seen. That same year, the Linguistic Society of America gave Maria their Young Scholar Award, the most prestigious recognition for emerging linguists. When she gave her acceptance speech, she looked out at the audience of hundreds of linguists from around the world. "We tell stories about language," she began. "We tell stories about which languages are advanced and which are primitive. We tell stories about which cultures achieved linguistic sophistication and which didn't. These stories shape how we think about the world. They shape how we value different peoples." She paused, looking directly at the camera broadcasting the event globally. "But those stories are wrong. They're not based on linguistic evidence. They're based on power, on colonialism, on the assumption that Western equals advanced." She held up her textbook. "This book challenges those stories. It presents linguistic evidence. It shows that sophistication exists everywhere, that beauty exists in every language, that every culture has solved the puzzle of human communication in ways worth studying and respecting." The standing ovation lasted 5 minutes. Later that evening, Maria received an email from Professor Mitchell. The subject line simply read, "I'm proud of you." The message: you didn't just prove Tagalog was sophisticated, you changed how the entire field thinks about language, culture, and human value. That takes more than intelligence. That takes courage. That takes character. I'm honored to have been part of your journey." Maria sat back in her chair, looking at the email. She thought about that day in the lecture hall when students laughed at her question. She thought about the humiliation, the doubt, the moment when she could have accepted their dismissal and moved on. But she hadn't. Instead, she had done the work. She had trusted her knowledge. She had challenged the authority. She had changed the world's understanding of language. Her accent hadn't changed, but now the entire world was listening. And more importantly, they were finally understanding.